I had lived alone in my split-level house for almost 2 years. It wasn't supposed to be that way. My sister and I had moved in together, each taking a floor. But over time, she spent more nights at her boyfriend's place than she did at home, leaving me with an entire level of solitude. I wasn't someone who scared easily. I was 30 years old, and living alone was supposed to be empowering, a sign of independence. But there were nights, like this one, when the silence of the house stretched too long, and shadows pooled in corners just a little too dark. That night, I had been watching a horror movie in my open-concept living space. The way the room was designed meant that my couch faced the TV, leaving my back exposed to the wide, unlit space behind me. Something about that made me uneasy. Even as I tried to immerse myself in the film, I found myself glancing over my shoulder every few minutes, an itch of paranoia crawling over my skin. Eventually, I shut off the TV, brushed my teeth, and turned out the lights. Sleep took me quickly, and then 2 hours later, I woke up. I didn't sit up immediately. At first, I wasn't sure what had pulled me from sleep. The room was still, the air heavy with silence. But then I heard it. A voice. It was unmistakable, low but distinct, echoing from the floor below. It was my sister's voice. I frowned, my drowsy mind struggling to catch up. She hadn't been home when I went to bed, and she hadn't mentioned coming back tonight. Yet here she was, calling my name from the lower level. I swung my legs over the bed, still groggy. Maybe she had come home unexpectedly. Maybe she and her boyfriend had argued, and she needed a place to cool off. As I stepped into the hallway, I flicked on the light. The glow illuminated the upper floor, but below me, the stairway was drenched in darkness. "Sarah," I called out, my voice hoarse from sleep. The response came immediately. "Down here." The tone was odd. There was something off about it, something too hollow. But it was definitely her voice. Still, unease trickled down my spine as I descended the stairs. I reached for the switch in the foyer, but in my half-asleep state, my fingers fumbled, failing to find it. "Where are you?" I muttered, blinking to adjust to the dimness. No response. I took a few more steps forward, my eyes gradually adjusting as the faint light from the kitchen stretched toward me. I turned the corner into her bedroom. It was empty. Completely empty. I stood frozen in the doorway, my breath stuck in my throat. Then, a thump behind me. I spun around, my pulse spiking. The noise had come from the very room I had just checked. I felt a rush of cold dread wash over me. I had just been in there, and there had been nothing. I backed away, my legs suddenly weak. The room was still. No shadows moved. No breath hitched in the air. I turned and bolted up the stairs, my chest heaving. My phone was still on my nightstand, my lifeline to sanity. I grabbed it and dialed my sister's number, my fingers trembling. It rang. Once. Twice. Then she picked up. Her voice was groggy, annoyed. "What the hell? It's 1 a.m. I swallowed. "Are you home?" "What?" "No, I told you, I'm staying at Eli's." "What's wrong?" I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. "Nothing," I whispered, my own voice feeling foreign. I didn't sleep that night. I kept my door locked, my ears straining for another sound. Morning came, and with it, a frail sense of safety. I forced myself downstairs, checking my sister's room in daylight. Nothing was out of place. There was nothing on the floor that could have fallen. Nothing that could explain what I had heard. I told myself it had been a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But the truth still lingers in the back of my mind. That voice was real. And if it wasn't my sister, who or what was calling my name? Story 2. I had always hated being home alone at night. Maybe it was because I grew up watching too many horror movies, or maybe it was because of the quiet. It wasn't soothing. It was suffocating. At 17, I was old enough to be left alone without issue, but that didn't make it any easier. My mom worked nights at the hospital, and my dad had been out of the picture for years, so it was just me in the house. Usually, I tried not to overthink it. I'd stay up watching TV, texting friends, anything to keep myself distracted. That night had started out normal enough. My friend Emily had come over to watch a movie, and when it got late, she left, promising to text me when she got home. I saw her car pull out of the driveway and disappear down the road, leaving me alone in the dimly lit house. I wasn't tired yet, so I went upstairs to my room, flopped onto my bed, and started scrolling through my phone. The window next to my bed was open, letting in a cool summer breeze. The sound of crickets and the occasional distant car filled the silence. Then, I heard something else. A scraping sound. It was subtle at first, just barely audible over the white noise of the night. But when I focused on it, my stomach clenched. It was coming from outside, more specifically, from the back deck. I hesitated, then stood and crept to the window, peering down. A man was sitting in one of the deck chairs. I yanked back, my heart slamming against my ribs. He hadn't been there when Emily left. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to peek out again, slower this time. The figure remained motionless, sitting in the chair as if he belonged there. The porch light was off, making it hard to see any defining details. But I could make out the shape of him, tall, broad shoulders, slouched posture. His head was tilted slightly upward, and I had the sickening realization that he was looking right at my window. I swallowed hard. My fingers hovered over my phone screen. Call the police, I told myself. But some irrational part of me hesitated. What if he was just some drunk neighbor? What if I was overreacting? Instead, I texted Emily. There's some guy sitting on my deck. She didn't answer right away. The scraping sound came again. The man was shifting in the chair. My skin prickled. Emily finally responded. Emily? What? Who? Me. He's just sitting there, staring. I waited for her reply. Nothing. I peeked out the window again. He hadn't moved. He was still there, looking up, his face obscured by the darkness. I worked up the nerve to call out, keeping my voice firm. Hey, can I help you? No response. No movement. Just that same eerie silence. A chill crept up my spine. I grabbed my phone again, my fingers shaking. He won't answer. He's just sitting there. I was about to call the police when I heard it. Laughter. It started quiet, like a wheeze. Then it grew, a breathy, strained sound that made my stomach twist. The man was laughing. I could see his shoulders shaking now, his body convulsing slightly with the silent chuckles. But he wasn't making any real noise beyond the occasional wheeze. Panic surged through me. I stumbled away from the window, nearly tripping over my own feet. My hands fumbled with the lock, and I slammed the window shut. I yanked the curtains closed, backing up until I hit the opposite wall. The laughter stopped. My phone vibrated in my hand. Emily, call the cops. Now. I was about to, but then a new sound. Not from outside. From inside. A slow creaking noise coming from downstairs. The front door. I clamped a hand over my mouth, forcing myself not to make a sound. Had I locked the door after Emily left? My mind was racing, trying to remember. Another creak. Then, footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Moving through the house. I backed toward my closet, barely breathing. I slipped inside, easing the door shut just enough to leave a crack. My phone screen was the only light, casting a faint glow over the cramped space. I typed with trembling fingers. He's inside. The footsteps reached the stairs. They were slow, unhurried, as if whoever it was knew they had all the time in the world. Step, step, step. They reached the top of the stairs. My bedroom door was open. I could see through the tiny gap in the closet door. A shadow stretched across the floor. Then, silence. The figure was standing just outside my room. I held my breath, my whole body screaming at me not to move. The closet door wasn't locked. If he opened it, I had nowhere to go. The shadow moved. A long, agonizing moment passed before I heard a new sound, my bedroom window sliding open. He was leaving. I waited, forcing myself to stay still, even as my muscles ached from tension. Minutes dragged by, and finally, I dared to move. I inched the closet door open. My bedroom was empty. I crept toward the window. The curtains were pushed aside, and the window was wide open, just as I'd left it before. But the man was gone. The deck below was empty. I locked the window. Then I locked my bedroom door. Then I ran downstairs and checked the front door. It was still locked. That didn't make sense. I heard it open. I checked every room in the house, my heart pounding. Nothing was out of place. No sign that anyone had been there at all. I stayed awake the rest of the night, sitting in the living room with the lights on. The next morning, I checked the deck again, and that's when I saw it. The chair where the man had been sitting was pulled away from the table, slightly turned toward the house, and on the ground next to it, a single, muddy footprint. Like someone had stepped down from the chair, climbed onto the railing, and hoisted themselves up to my window. That was the last night I ever left my window open. Story 3. I was 13 when I truly understood what fear was. Not the kind you get from watching a scary movie or walking through a haunted house. No, this was something else. Something primal. Something that curled around my bones and stayed with me long after that night. It started with a phone call. I was in my room, playing some mindless game on my old laptop, when I heard my mom pick up the phone downstairs. The walls in our house were thin, and I could hear the shift in her voice. First normal, then tense, then frantic. My stomach twisted. I paused the game and crept to the top of the stairs, listening. We're on our way. Her voice was thick with fear. I heard the rustling of coats, my dad's voice low and urgent. Then, my mom called up to me. Lena, honey, we have to go. Your brother was in an accident. My breath hitched. My brother, Noah, was out with his friends that night. He was 15, reckless, and always getting into trouble. But this was different. I could hear it in her voice. Is he okay? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He's in the hospital, my dad said quickly. He'll be fine. But we have to leave now. Panic warred with logic in my mind. I didn't want to be home alone, but I didn't want to see Noah hurt, either. My parents grabbed their keys, bundled my little sister into the car, and within seconds, they were gone. And I was alone. I tried to tell myself it was fine. I'd been left alone before. I'd stay up for a bit, watch some TV, then go to bed. Noah would be fine. Everything would be fine. It wasn't. I was back in my room, curled up under my blanket, playing on my laptop, when I heard it. The front door. Not opening, just shifting. A slight creak, like pressure was being put on it. I froze. The house settled all the time. It was old, filled with its own eerie groans and pops. But this was different. This was deliberate. I clicked my laptop shut and slid out of bed, moving carefully toward the top of the stairs. The lights were still off, but from the dim glow of the street lamp outside, I could see into the living room below. My breath caught in my throat. 3 people stood in the shadows. I nearly gasped, but I clamped a hand over my mouth. My pulse roared in my ears. They hadn't seen me. They were moving carefully, whispering to one another, their faces obscured by the darkness. My mind raced. How did they get in? The door had been locked. I was sure of it. And then, as if in answer, I noticed the front door, still slightly open. I took a step back, my hands trembling. My room was at the end of the hallway. If I moved fast enough, I could get back inside, lock the door, and hide. But before I could move, one of them turned. I ducked down just in time, pressing myself against the wall. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure they would hear it. The footsteps started toward the stairs. I bit back a sob. I had to move. Keeping as quiet as possible, I shuffled backward down the hall, not daring to look toward the staircase. The steps creaked, slow and deliberate. Whoever it was, they weren't rushing. They were taking their time. I reached my room, stepped inside, and locked the door. Then I darted to my closet and wedged myself behind the boxes of old clothes, barely breathing. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. A long silence stretched out, thick and heavy. Then, my bedroom door handle rattled. I squeezed my eyes shut. The handle rattled again, harder this time. Then came the knocking, soft at first, then louder. A whisper followed. I know you're in there. I almost screamed. The voice was light, sing-song, playful. Not angry, not demanding, just teasing. I pressed my back against the wall, my body trembling. My phone was still in my pocket, but I didn't dare turn on the screen. The glow would give me away. The knocking stopped. I let out a breath. Maybe they'd given up. Maybe they thought no one was home. Then, I heard footsteps moving again, away from my door, back down the hallway. I dared to peek through the crack of my closet. From my limited view, I could see the faint outline of my window, the moonlight casting a sliver of light across the carpet. And in that light, a shadow moved. My throat closed. Someone was outside. I turned, ever so slowly, peering through the slats of my closet door. And there, standing outside my second-floor window, was a face. It was pressed against the glass, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, fogging up the pain. I nearly stopped breathing. The person outside reached up and tapped the glass, once, twice, before breaking into a grin. I shut my eyes, praying I was imagining it. A long moment passed. Then, the tapping stopped. I cracked my eyes open. The face was gone. My entire body was shaking. I reached for my phone, finally daring to turn on the screen. My fingers fumbled as I dialed. The operator answered immediately. I kept my voice low, barely above a whisper, as I told them there were intruders in my house. The police were on their way, but I wasn't safe yet. I heard the front door slam. My breath hitched. Were they leaving? Or was that just one of them? I stayed in the closet, listening. A few minutes passed. Then, sirens. I nearly collapsed in relief. When the police arrived, I finally came out of the closet, rushing downstairs just as two officers entered. They searched the entire house, but the intruders were gone. The front door had been unlocked, but there were no signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No damage. Nothing. It was like they had just walked in. The officers took my statement, stayed with me until my parents came home. My mom hugged me so tight I thought I'd break. My dad was furious at himself, at the world, at the fact that this had happened while I was alone. But the worst part? The next morning, when we checked the house in daylight, we found something outside my bedroom window. Handprints. Smudged onto the glass, clear as day. But here's the thing. We lived in a 2-story house. There was no way to reach that window. No ledge. No balcony. No tree nearby. Nothing. Just empty air. I never slept in that room again.